I am very proud to respond to this toast, as it recalls the proudest day of my life. The delightful hospitality shown me at the time of my visit to Oxford, I shall cherish until I die. In that long and distinguished career of mine, I value that degree above all other honors. When the ship landed, even the stevedores gathered on the shore and gave an English cheer. Nothing could surpass in my life the pleasure of those 4 weeks. There didn't seem to be anyone above taking me by the hand. Even the police would do so. I think I have been in every capital in Christendom, and I have always been an object of interest to the police. But London surpassed them all. The London police always saluted me, sometimes with a suspicious eye, but not always. And the policeman there would lift his hand and paralyze the commerce of the world to let me pass. I like that. I approve heartily of the message which Bishop Lawrence of New England has conveyed. But he has overlooked one thing, and I ask permission to add it. It is important. I read in a telegram from Washington today that Congress will immediately pass a bill restoring to our gold coinage the words, "In God we trust." I'm glad of that. I was troubled when that motto was removed. I thought we would get into difficulties if we left it off, and straightway they came. The prosperity of the whole nation went down in a pile when we ceased to trust in God in that conspicuous and well-advertised way. I knew it would come. And if Pierpont Morgan hadn't stepped in just then, and, if the bishop will add in his message to the old country that we have resumed our trust in God, we will discharge Mr. Morgan from his high office with honor. Mr. Reed said an hour or so ago something about my ruining my health by my activities last summer. They were not ruined, they were renewed. I am stronger now, much stronger. I suppose that the spiritual uplift I received increased my physical power more than anything I ever had before. I was dancing last night at 12:30 o'clock. Mr. Choate is full of history, and some of it is true, too. He mentioned the long line of ministers we sent to England, people I never heard of before, and he elected 5 to the presidency by his own vote. I'm glad and proud to find Mr. Reed in that high position, because he didn't look like it when I first saw him 40 years ago. Raking among his old relics in his house the other day, he told me that he had found an old autograph of mine written in those days. I didn't know I had an autograph then. Nobody ever asked for it. I remember the first time I came from the Pacific coast a stranger to New York and had my first New York dinner, that is, the first I didn't pay for. Whitelaw Reid paid for it. There were present Whitelaw Reid, John Hay, and myself. And I have lived all this long stretch of time and have seen Whitelaw Reid rise and rise, and enjoyed his hospitality in London at the embassy that Choate blackguards so. I'd like to live there. I visited him, too, at number 123 Victoria Street. The position suited him. Some people say they couldn't live on the salary, but I could live on the salary and the nation together. Some of us don't appreciate what this country can do. There's John Hay, Reed, Choate, and me. This is the only country in the world where such characters could do these things. It shows that we can do so without means, and what people can do with talent and energy when they find it in people like us. When I first came to New York, they were all struggling young men, and I am glad to see that they have got on in the world. I knew John Hay when I had no white hairs in my head and more hair than Reed has now. Those were days of joy and hope. Reed and Hay were on the staff of the Tribune. I went there once in that old building, and I looked all around, and I finally found a door ajar and looked in. It wasn't Reed or Hay there, but it was Horace Greeley. Those were the days when Horace Greeley was a king. I remember it was the first time I ever saw him. I was admiring him when he stopped and seemed to realize that there was a fine presence there somewhere. He tried to smile, but he was out of smiles. He looked at me a moment and said, "What in hell do you want?" He began with that word, hell. That's a long word and a profane word. I don't remember what the word means, but I recognize the power of it. I had never used that language myself, but at that moment I was converted. It has been a great refuge for me in times of trouble. If a man doesn't know that language, he can't express himself on strenuous occasions. When you have that word at your command, let trouble come. But later, Hay rose, and you know what summit Whitelaw Reid has reached, and you see me. Those two men have regulated troubles of nations and conferred peace upon mankind, and in my humble way, of which I am quite vain, I was the principal moral force in all those great international movements. These great men illustrated what I say. Look at us great people. We all come from the dregs of society. That's what can be done in this country. That's what this country does for you. Choate here, he hasn't got anything to say, but he says it just the same, and he can do it so felicitously, too. I said long ago he was the handsomest man America ever produced. May the progress of civilization always rest on such distinguished men as it has in the past.